Welcome back to our Money Mindset podcast, where we are the Money Mindset mentors, and we want to help you be able to get financially savvy and make those beautiful investment choices because you can. We want to create that abundance for yourself and for others and do it for him. So if that's your jam, you are in the right place. We are so excited to have one of our beautiful mentors, Rachel Jones, back with us today. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
We're so happy. This is, if you notice, a lot of times we as moms, we're in the car, right? And so this is how we roll. I'm usually here and somebody's en route to something. So they're usually in the car. All right, we're going to jump right in today because we're talking about how to have those difficult conversations, those financial conversations with your young adult children. And that could be like, older teens, or it could be they're out of the house and 18, 19, or they're getting ready to fly the coop, and you want to have those financial conversations just as soon as you feel like they are ready to do so, because this is a big piece of moving out. So Rachel, just kind of give us an overview here of, you're an investment real estate, you're a realtor, an investment person, you do your own investments, you help other people with investments. What do you see as one of the biggest challenges with parents trying to help their kids learn how to do this kind of stuff, how to have these conversations, how to think in terms of successful financial principles and practices? What's some of the challenges that you see?
I think a big challenge is this, that they're having these conversations when they're in the moment. Like, it's time to get an apartment at college, and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, I don't even have a job. Like, how am I supposed to say that I earn 3 times the rent, And so I think that that's a huge challenge. Like, how do you overcome that in the moment, when if we take a step back when we're younger parents and we're like, okay, these things are going to be important in the future of my children. Let's talk about them at a younger age.
So what age would you recommend starting these conversations? And it doesn't have to be sit down for 2 hours, but just when do you recommend starting those?
What's interesting is obviously every child is different, right? So if you are looking and listening to the passions of your individual children, I think that will kind of guide you. So you might have a child that's very interested in what you do. Like, for instance, for me personally, I have one child at a younger age. He was very interested in the things that I did. So I would talk to him because he was passionate about it. I didn't want to force anything on my children or whatever. And so just making sure that you're paying attention to where your child is, where your children are, I think is extremely important.
And I love the interest. Well, you said the interest level, because I noticed with some of my kids, I was all gung-ho about talking about these things, and they were like, okay, TikTok, like, how much longer do we have? But I noticed that when, they were 16, 17, and they wanted to get a car or be able to participate in the family car, or they started looking at, friends were looking at starting to move out at 17 or 18 or whatever. Oh, I want to know about this. That readiness level was a perfect time for me to be ready with what I wanted to share of how it would help them, to be able to lay the groundwork and say, okay, if you want to move out, and we talk a lot in here about reverse engineering, that a good way to have a conversation is to reverse engineer. You want to move out? Okay, then let's take the backward steps it's going to take. You're going to need to show on an application, you need to do an application, and it's going to ask you what your income is and to verify it. And you're going to need a resume or information of your previous employers, so they know what kinds of things to anticipate, so that, like you said, it's not a surprise, it's not a shock. And it gives them time to start working towards that. Instead of mom and dad nagging, it's, if I want to move out with my friends, I need to do X, Y, and Z in order to make that happen. So I love that you bring up that.
Yeah. And, the other thing that I think that goes along with that, as we're raising children, I think it's important as parents that we understand for ourselves, like, what is it that we are going to contribute to our children as they leave the nest, as they're going to college? Like, what are we going to provide for them, if anything? Because if you can imagine being that age, I remember when I was that age, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just left and was like, okay, I guess I have to get a job. And things were so different then. I didn't have to guarantee that my rent was, or my employment was 3 times as much or whatever. But had someone sat down with me and said, hey, as your parents, like, we would really like you to be independent from day one. And then I would know what the expectations were. And just kind of like you said, like you could go through, like Google an application for a lease, or Google, whatever it is that you want to teach your kids, and walk it through with them so that they know exactly what the expectations are going to be. And, then it takes a lot of that anxiety and that fear away.
I love that. And that's the same thing for a car, right? Walking them through backwards. If you want to get a car or participate in the family car, there's insurance and there's registration and there's oil changes and there's the gas and helping them. They're going to need tires. And in the winter, you may need snow tires, and helping them to understand the costs associated with the car, so they don't just think, oh, mom and dad are just like annoying, right?
Yeah.
I love that idea of really laying that out and letting that be their choice, that they can clearly see what's going to be required. And I love the point that you bring up, how much you're going to help as a parent. What do you see as successful? I know every child is different, every family is different, get that. But what would be a good rule of thumb that is maybe something you could recommend? Because this is a difficult thing when I'm talking with my friends. You want to help them, but then you don't want to take away the independence, and you don't want to take away those learning lessons. Dallin H. Oaks talks about, don't take away the experiences of your children that made you who you are. And I think about that a lot. Now that they're in college, I talk about my college days, and the woe is me stories of, I was so poor, I literally would look on the ground for 25 cents for an apple, because that's how much the vending machine apple was, right? Like literally, like cue the violins. But I think it's important that they understand this, that just because moms and dads have a house and a nice car and things like that, that doesn't mean that we're supposed to provide that same level of living when they're starting out in college. And I share that with my kids of, these are the memory maker years, you guys. This is getting in those apartments. We had the lamest, craziest apartment situation, but it was such an amazing learning, independence giving experience that I had to be all in, and I was responsible fully 100%. Now, I don't want that for my kids. I want them to have a little bit of help. But what do you see has been helpful in helping kids?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's something that I've been noticing a lot lately too, is just owning businesses and hiring, a lot of employees. It's interesting to see where different people are work ethic wise. And so I think it's very important that we're not giving our kids, just handing them everything, right? I'm with you. I don't want my kids to just struggle like I did. I struggled a lot. And am I the person I am because of that? Yes. But at the same time, I also, from the vantage point that I have right now, I feel like, okay, if we can give our kids a little bit, then they are able to take that, and then they're able to grow that more because they have that opportunity. So I think that when we give our kids something, that you should also have the expectations tied to it. And if those expectations aren't being met, then you have to have that hard conversation of, hey, this is what we agreed to. And because it's not being fulfilled, we're going to have to back off with our agreement. I think that's extremely important, so that we're not just going with this entitlement mentality. So yeah, I wish I could give like a concrete, this is what we do, XYZ, but like we say, I mean, everyone's so different. And not only that, but like our situations are different as far as like financially, right? So one parent might be able to give more financially, and another might be able to give more like just active support in some way. So it's hard to kind of pinpoint down what exactly I would recommend.
And I think a couple of good thoughts for being more specific is having that conversation with that child, saying, here are the different ways that we can support you. There's financial, emotional, there's physical, in the sense of coming and painting your apartment and, bringing Christmas decorations and things like that. My daughter at her apartment last year, they had no Christmas decorations in her apartment. And I came over to visit and I was like, what the what? So we brought some for our house and then got a couple for her, not over the top, but just a few things. And it just made it Christmassy. And it felt like it was a nice addition, instead of, no, you do this yourself, right? Or just overdone Christmas, vomited in the apartment. So I think it's helpful to ask them, out of these things, what is the one way this semester that we can help you, or this coming year, or something like that? Or what is the way that you would rather have? We can do X amount financially, or we can do X amount hours, so to speak, of helping you move and and fixing up an apartment or blah, 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 or those kinds of things. So having that conversation, asking the way that you can help, and then as parents, you choosing one or two ways that you're going to be helpful, I think helps set the expectation of you're not the catch-all. Because I think if we don't do that as parents, we become the default of you need to fix this for me, or I have nowhere else to turn, right? And we've been there where you have nowhere else to turn. I was on my own. And that is not a fun feeling either of I am absolutely desperate, right? Because then you do desperate things of like, what do I need to do to make this successful or make it work? So I like that idea of having the conversation and being specific and asking what way would be the most helpful for them once a parent has figured out what they are comfortable giving. And this idea, like you said, of give and give back, that I have a daughter that I help her with her tuition, but I actually have her pay some of the tuition and then she pays me in installments. Now, she doesn't know that I actually put that into something else for her, but
yeah.
She's doing this. I want her to have ownership so that when she takes a class, she's not like, well, I can just drop it or whatever. She's got ownership on that. She knows the cost of that and she knows what it's costing her monthly, which is a small amount, but it's big to her, right? So anyway, a couple of ideas on that. I love that. Any other suggestions that you have on that?
I just, as you were kind of talking about when you went over to your daughter's apartment and you like put up a couple of Christmas decorations, I think that's something that's important to remember too, that like you were saying, we don't want them to be in desperation where they're feeling depressed or hopeless, but sometimes just that small act of like doing something a little bit gives them encouragement and also gets their mind going so that they have these ideas. And I think as a parent, that's like something that we can be good at, right? We can help our kids get the sparks rolling and saying, oh my goodness, that's such a good idea. And I love doing that. And I can do XYZ now because, you know, my mom just came over and gave me Christmas decorations. Now I can go and do whatever, you know? So I think that's really important that we want our kids to be successful. We don't want them to be hopeless. So.
And feel oppressed or suppressed, because then they won't come up with those creative ideas, right? And I know, another thought that I wanted to kind of touch on for a second is helping them to see, like you're just saying, piggybacking on that, the possibilities of what they can do when they move out. They can do a variety of things of providing for themselves. When I think I've mentioned before, when I was at BYU, I first started out, I started typing papers because I was doing, you know, I needed to earn more money. And that was a skill that I had, was fast typing. And I had a roommate that had an old typewriter. That tells you how long ago that was. A typewriter. And so I would pay her like $5 a month to like lease the typewriter. And then I would do $2.50 of paper or whatever. And I'd have to get the carbon and things like that. But I was able to help support myself by doing that very thing. And it's kind of fast forward. My daughter wants to earn more money. Well, I teach women how to take their message and then help it to become a side gig of being able to get that out there. So I'm like, I'm teaching her these principles. I'm like, you know what I can give back to her is I can teach her these principles. And she is, like, we went back to this interested thing. She's an interested learner now. She wants to know. And now she's starting her own graphic design business because that's her major.
Awesome.
And she's starting her own graphic design business. So now she's seeing, oh, I don't have to wait until I graduate. I can start now. And my give as a parent is helping her to get that foundation and start with some really good principles that will help her set up that business successfully. So anyway, something to consider. Any thoughts about that, of helping your kids create and generate more income when they move out?
Well, just kind of to go off what you were saying really quickly, I really love that idea of teaching her from what you've already experienced, because instead of us lecturing or saying, hey, you should really do XYZ, they are taking that what they learned from you. She's probably soaking it all in, and she's loving it, you know? So I think that's awesome. So what was your question?
Oh, that you just kind of answered it, of just helping them to understand how to create that abundance when they've moved out, right? And that there's more than just getting a, minimum wage job, that they can start being creative. And that's kind of that thread that we're talking about, is teaching this in a way that keeps their options and possibilities flourishing, rather than this is this and that is that. And now you got to come up with all this money. How are you going to do it? Right? We don't want that feel. We want this to be a very supportive coach on the sideline. You've got this.
Yes.
Here's a good playbook, and here's a play that maybe you could try.
Along with that, so I was telling you, I've got one son that was interested in what my field is at an earlier age. And then another son who was like, it's kind of fun, but whatever. Right.
Right.
And so a couple of years ago, we actually helped them purchase a property in Provo, Utah, an investment property. And it was interesting because, obviously I had that one son who was always interested in things, but then my second son, all of a sudden, once he had that and we were, looking at all the numbers, we were suggesting different ways to bring in additional money, et cetera. And his mind just was blown. And he was like, oh my gosh, like, I love this. And it's in their own time, right?
Yes.
Get them in different circumstances and they'll get it. They'll totally get it. Just walk beside them.
I love that. And again, I love how these different points just kind of surface when we do these. This readiness, look for the readiness. And then you as a parent, be ready for that moment of readiness so that you can share what you've learned. That's why it's so important that we as women especially get these financial principles down. We learn them, we know them, we practice them so that then we can share it with them with real life examples. My girls are watching me all the time. I'm sharing things with them of things I've learned, or we were able to do X, Y, and Z and how we went about it so that they are learning this stuff. I don't know about you, but my sweet mom, who is wonderful, but that's back in the day where they did not talk about money. No one talked about finances. No one talked about you. I didn't even know how much they made. Like, it was just like, you don't talk about it. So I love that we're having more dialogue about this nowadays, instead of it just being like, you're moving out. Woo! Now I have to learn all this stuff in 2 weeks.
Well, and isn't it interesting? Because we don't even talk about it really at school. Like, there might be a finance class here or there.
Financial literacy.
And but really, do you really learn that much? And I do think, to your point, how important it is to talk about money these days, and not like, you don't have to go disclose every single thing that,
Right.
but it is that it needs to be comfortable for everyone to talk about so that they can feel secure and so they can feel that money equals abundance, right? Like, if we're not talking about it and we're keeping it hidden, they're not going to feel that. They're going to feel like this fear, like, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to talk about it. Oh my gosh, it's not around me. It just needs to be the opposite, I think.
Absolutely. And that abundance. And again, we talk about it in a faith-based way here. I think also helping them to partner with the Lord with the financial aspect. I teach them about the faith tithe that I pay, or fast offerings and a generous fast offerings and things like that. This is all part of a business setting as well, at least for me, in my opinion, that what we're doing is not separate, personal and professional. It's all connected in the way that we approach money. It's all about how can I be a wise steward over what I've been given in order to create abundance for ourselves and others? How can we make this happen and do that by partnering with the Lord? So I think also having that be a part of the conversation is a really key piece, because I know getting through college, I was partnering with the Lord. That's how I got through those squeaky, scary places in college that there was nothing, right? The cupboard was bare.
Yeah.
Literally, the cupboard was bare, like not cue the violins, but literally, like, I remember there was a 4 thing of cabinets in the wall, and my 3 roommates all had food and I did not. I mean, I remember.
Oh my gosh.
So you know what I'm saying? And it fueled me, like, okay, what do I got to do? What do I got to do differently? But I partnered with the Lord, and I feel like teaching our young adult kids early that principle will keep them in a good, abundant space, instead of hopping on that fast track of, I got to make the money and I've got to do this and knocking out old ladies and walkers, just I've got to get to the top of the heap. I think it helps them keep that lens over investments or getting money for college or whatever. I just talked with my daughter and she was like, I know I need to come up with XYZ for college tuition and things like that. She doesn't know what's coming for Christmas. But anyway, she said, I know I need to come up with a variety of things. And she's really putting the pedal to the metal and making it happen. But she said, you know what, Mom, I feel really peaceful. I've talked it over with Heavenly Father and I've come up with a plan and I feel really peaceful. And I'm like, so anything that I do is a bonus. It's gravy, right? And then she can just feel even happier. But teaching them that concept of feeling peace in the abundance that they have, even in the seemingly lack of abundance, I think is a really important point for them to be able to successfully come come across and deal with all of those financial situations that are going to come to them when they move out.
Absolutely, 100%. And going along with that, just recognizing that we a lot of times can't control a lot of our situation, but something we can control is number one, our relationship with the Lord, right? And also we can control what we do for others. And so something that really helps me, especially when I am like thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do in this situation? Or, oh, that didn't turn out how I thought it was going to, is giving, right? Or serving someone else, because that's something that I can control. And that also helps me to put my focus back on Christ and being a steward of Christ. And when I'm in that mindset, then all these other ideas and thoughts come to my mind where I am able to feel that peace again. And so I think that's so important that we teach our kids, like, when these situations arise and when you feel like you're out of control, that grounding yourself, whatever that means, and turning yourself, making sure that you are in alignment with the Lord is super, super important.
I love that. Oh my gosh, we could do a whole nother 20, 30 minutes on just the importance of giving and sacrifice with the whole financial aspect. And we probably will, because that's a great topic. Let's switch the gears for just a half a second, and let's go to some of the nitty gritty. What are good ways to talk to our kids about savings, checking accounts, debit cards, and credit cards? Because moving out means they are now in charge of these things. And we'll come back to this again for sure. But what are just some top of mind things that would be helpful for parents to share with their kids about managing those things successfully?
Yeah. So a couple of things that come to my mind is start early, right? Especially with like a savings account. So I can remember like my grandparents, they like when each of the grandkids were born, they would put X amount of dollars into their, account. And interestingly, like throughout my growing up years, that was never talked about. Like I knew that there was like, a little bit of money in there, but it was never encouraged to, hey, maybe you should put some money in there. Or like I, had no idea. So as you have kids or your kids are young or whatever, start that savings account with them. Talk to them about savings, talk to them about interest. And if you don't understand it yourself, there are a lot of people that do, and you can go to your local bank or credit union and get some help with that to teach your kids. So I think that's super important. And also I think when you do, like a lot of kids will want to do, they'll want to do like, what's it called? Like lemonade stands or something like that. So as they want to do those things, help them come up with prices for their lemonade stands. Like I remember when my kids wanted to do it and we were trying to come up with prices, and my husband said, how about you just ask people for tips? And it was really interesting because the amount of tips was far greater than someone would pay, like, 25 cents. No, a lot of times you'd see like $1 or like $5. And it was a really interesting concept. So, being creative like that. Another idea is pay yourself first, which I learned from my grandpa. Like every time you would earn some money that you needed to pay yourself, obviously paying your tithing if that's what you do too, but like paying yourself so that you always have a little nest egg. And so you're always secure. Also, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say to that point, I think that's an especially hard thing for women, that they tend to not value themselves and say, I want to make sure everybody else is paid, everyone else is taken care of, everything else is cared for. Is there anything left? Right. And it doesn't even have to be a big amount. It's just validating and valuing your effort, your energy, what you put into it. So it's a consistent amount that you would just pull back and put in an account and say, I have paid myself first. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's just $1, like if you are paying yourself and if you feel like that's all you can do, at least you're getting in the habit of doing it. So it's super important. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So. And I love the idea of that, talking to them about with the savings account. One thought is, I taught my girls, this is just what we do, but anyways, they have their savings and their checkings, and then we have a money market. And I encourage them to put the bulk of what they have in the money market because it gave them better interest rate and a better return on it, even though it was just marginal, but still it was better. So the bigger amount you had in there, it was like the pool of money. And then they could pull out what they thought they would need in their checking. And then they would have their savings was generally put into that money market. So the savings wasn't just sitting there in a savings account.
Yeah.
The money market was actually a better return for it. So then they would just pull at the checking for what they needed, for the daily, for the weekly, or whatever. So it is something to consider, because as those numbers get bigger, that impact really, it's a small, tiny thing, but it is actually a more helpful thing. And then it keeps the bulk of their money out of mind. When they look at their checking account, they can see it's small, so it makes them think twice about a purchase, because they sometimes forget that they've got this big pool of money in this other space, whatever big seems, relative. So it is something to consider in talking about these accounts, maybe looking at not just the usual ways of doing things, but seeing, is there a better way to do something that will work for them? The other thing I would love you to touch on really quickly is debit cards and credit cards. Now, I know when I went to college, I didn't know I could get a credit card. Hallelujah. Because I don't know that I could.
Yeah, right.
That's
Yeah.
the bonus, right? Or it's midnight and you're being stupid. You're like, let's order pizza, right? And then you're paying for that for 2 years. So, and I saw friends that ended college with thousands of dollars of credit card debt and not really knowing where that came from. So I'm so grateful that I didn't know. What would be some good tips for having that debit card, credit card conversation with your kids?
Well, so we were concerned about that like at a young age too. So I don't even remember. I think our kids were probably 14 maybe when we got them both a debit card and a credit card, both. Interestingly, the credit card was not on their own. So their credit card was tied to a credit card that my husband and myself had. And the reason for that, for us anyway, is just so that they could learn while they were under our house in our home. So we knew exactly kind of what was going on. And we could see like spending habits, and we could teach them as they went along. And they had a certain limit, that they could use it for, and things like that. So we did have some rules in there that they had to follow. But I think that's a really good way to have it tied to yours, so that you know exactly where they're at and you can teach them. You could show them exactly what can happen if like you're at college and you sign up for these credit cards. Interestingly, I can't remember her name, but there's a mom out there that like fought the credit card companies for being able to put credit card like tables, right? Didn't they used to have like tables that you could sign up for credit cards and you'd get like a free t-shirt?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know that there's a mom out there that really fought that. And I believe that the credit card companies, anyway. So I think that's really interesting, because a lot of people do not understand how to use credit cards. So if you can teach them, once again, if you can teach them at a younger age to be responsible, and you also give them some examples of what can happen to your credit. So talk about credit. Talk about the dangers of it. Talk about, you're not going to be able to get a car if you want to use your credit, or you're not even going to be able to find a place to live, because a lot of places look at your credit history. That's huge.
We
so
had
it's
that
not
discussion.
even.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's not even about purchasing things. It's about your stability. Where are you going to sleep at night? Like if you're not responsible for yourself and keeping track of your money and these credit, keeping your credit in check, then it can affect every aspect of your life.
The impact. I think that's one of the biggest things that underestimated. We don't talk about things impact from that, which is that credit score, that they don't understand choices they make now are going to impact in the future. So I love that. And I think helping them, like you were talking about, I think what keeps coming up is this habits and these principles and practices, right? Having these financial practices, and we help them start early with what that could look like as far as being good. Talk about credit rates, right? The interest rates of different credit cards, and what happens if you skip a payment or if you don't make a payment or things like that, we all know, but they will not know. I love the idea that you help them. We felt strongly about that too, of them building credit. And perhaps for someone who's maybe listening and going, I don't know if I want them on my credit because I don't know if I can trust that child. Another thing to consider is, one thing we did, I did with my kids, is that I had them buy something they wanted on credit with me. So I had them practice doing something for 3 to 6 months and showing they had to pay it on a certain day. And if they didn't, they would get dinged. And they did a really great job of being consistent and paying it. In fact, one of my daughters was so good at, I forgot that she was supposed to do it, and she would do it regularly. But I think that's a really important thing. And one of them, had a run in with the garage door, and I had her do that same thing. I said, well, you just pay it to me in installments. And that was a practice for them to be able to learn how to pay a bill on time. And that's a good practice before they get a credit card. If you can see they can successfully do that, then maybe hook them onto a credit card and you can see if they can do it to build credit, because that's another smack in the face is if they need to get something that maybe a computer or something for school, like my daughter with graphic design, maybe they need to show that they have good credit history and they don't have any. So before jumping into that deep end of the pool, that could be a good way to insert that into their experiences. I love this. Any last tips? I know we've covered several things and we will cover more on this in future ones because such good stuff. I just love this. I have all these ideas going of, ooh, I want to talk to them about X, Y, and Z. And it's been a while since we've chatted about that. Any last thoughts on being able to, in this part one of preparing your kids for their financial future? Any other tip that you want to share before we leave?
I would say be creative. Like just because you hear us, talking about our experiences or different thoughts, like there are hundreds, if not thousands of more ideas. And so use what we've talked about today to your advantage and to run with it with your own family and create something. Like right now, if you want to, I don't know, I'm just thinking of the giving season, right? And I think about just all the different ways to serve and be a part of your community. And it's just a great way to start. So just start somewhere, be creative and start somewhere.
I love it. I love it. And they will see this is how we roll. This is how we talk about finances, approach finances, how we partner with the Lord with him. I love these things that you shared where talk about figure out what their interest, pay attention to their interest, their readiness level, give and give back when you're talking about how much you're going to share as a parent or how much you're going to help, that giving, and then what are they going to give back so it's reciprocal and it's a win-win. About accounts, start early and talk about the details of it, and then helping them to look at the possibilities of what businesses or what ways they can create and generate abundance and money, especially when they move out. We will definitely be circling back to these things and getting more in depth because 30 minutes flies. But thank you so much for being with us today, Rachel, and the wonderful things that you shared.
Absolutely. See ya.
Thank you. And ladies, thank you so much for being with us. We love that you are loving these podcasts. It's so great to see the response to this. And if you love this, go ahead and watch the other ones from previous that have different topics and let us know. Comment below if there's topics that you want us to cover that we haven't yet covered, or if you want us to cover it more in depth. We'd be happy to do that. So please comment below and let us know. And meanwhile, helping you move forward on your purpose-filled life.